Which league hall buffs are the most important? Stay tuned as I break down every single one of them. Hello everyone, this is Redragon back with another episode of DC Universe Online. So the following video is going to evaluate all of the league hall buffs. If you're in a small or mid-size league that can't afford all of them on a cycle, this video is for you. Otherwise, click on the information link to the upper right to view my last video on marketplace currency. Okay, moving on. There might be a bunch of cases, even if you're in an active league, where you may not be able to get all the buffs for a particular cycle. And I've come across a few cases over the years. So here's a look at, this is my solo league, so obviously I can't afford everything here. And I think this probably gives away which ones I think are the most important, but I will break them down because some of them are situational. In my main league, I actually don't even look at any of these because we are active enough and large enough that we have all of them. And we have nothing to spend prestige on. In fact, we always go over. But, you know, there's a couple of situations where it can deplete. Like if you had an officer accidentally buy the same one more than once, because that, you know, that can happen. It doesn't stop you from rebuying one after just buying it, which is kind of weird because they put those safeguards in, you know, like the single base generators, but not in the league hall one. So yeah, you could rebuy any of these by mistake. If you hit lag or you have a muscle spasm or something. Probably pretty rare, but it can happen if someone's new to these controls. The other thing is you could simply make a bad decision and, you know, you buy the cosmetics when your league actually needs this stuff, and you don't earn enough for the cycle. So, but for the most part, this video is going to be for like small to mid-sized leagues that month to month can't afford any of these. So, okay, starting from the top, in my opinion, damage out is definitely up there, if not the most important one. Simply because, you know, you're going to have some people that are damage roll, some people that are support roll only, and some people that are both. So, chances are the damage out is going to outweigh anything else, because you know, besides the role split up, everyone's going to be playing solo missions, and the concentration stat is damage there because it's a solo, so you don't really have the roles there. And also for event content, damage out is also highlighted, regardless of role, because when they scale you, they don't want you to be in an instance for, they don't want you lingering in an instance if there are no damage rolls available. So they do buff your damage, and this will help out as well. So just the way the game works, damage out is definitely the most important. Second one on the list, healing out. This one probably doesn't impact anything really. Because your healer stats are going to eclipse anything this bonus gives you. Like this is increasing the league's healing out by 3% for 30 days. You know, I suppose if you're playing like elite content stuff where every percent counts, maybe. But for normal use, this is pretty minor. And obviously I have health here also selected. I would put this right next to damage outs, maybe even equivalent. So, because health is, it's used for every role, because if you don't have health, you're not going to be able to do anything else. So, yeah, I would say these two are definitely the top two. Power and supercharge, this probably does not come into effect unless the league is comprised of completely new players. The only time where power is an issue is if your skill points are like really low. To give you an idea, the current iteration of the game was tested, during the stats revamp. The testing was about 190 CR with 170 skill points to start. If you're around 170, you're going to be able to generate and cycle power without having issue of running out. For the most part, unless you're new to a power. But 170 allows you to have unlimited power for any power set as long as you figure out your loadout. So like if you're below that, maybe this will help you out. I would place this under minor. You see here I've selected critical attack. Now I don't always do that because I can only afford 3, so typically if I'm in a period where I'm using just mostly damage, so basically I buy 3 buffs whenever there's an event ongoing, because that's what my alts do. They just run event content and seasonal stuff. So for the most part it's a damage concentration. So I will typically go damage out, health, and critical attack. But there are some cases where, some periods of time where I might actually do support roles, and that's depending on the DLC that's out. So in a situation like that, I would go damage out, health, and then support stats, rather than critical attack. Okay, but continuing from the list, critical attack I would say is of middle importance. It's not as important as damage out and health, but the reason why critical attack I would place above like any of the percent buffs to other stats is because you can't build for it. Like for example, like might and precision support stats, you can assign skill points to it, and you can. There are like mods that buff it, but critical attack is very, very limited. Like you can put like only an upper limit of points into it in the beginning of your skill point settings, and there are very few mods that add to the critical. So you're going to want to choose critical whenever you see that compared to anything else. Now might and precision, it's another interesting one because a lot of people think might and precision are the same as damage out, and they are not. In the calculation, might and precision happens first. So yeah, typically the system will look at your stats, and then like if you're in a scaled instance, and just about everything in the game currently is scaled unless you're in open world. So if you enter like an older DLC, you might get scaled down. If you're a lower character in event content, you might get scaled up. So whatever your might and precision is, that is going to get scaled to something. And damage out happens afterwards. So for example, a buff to damage out often escapes the scaling. If you look at examples like the Demon's Claw and Demon's Claw artifact, because that does it gives you a damage buff based on your restoration stat. So it's not buffing might and precision, it's buffing the end product of damage. So if you had to choose between damage out and might and precision, you do damage out first. Because buffing this in some cases would get erased anyway. So this would be like a secondary damage thing after you got damage out if you had prestige to spare. Support stats, because there isn't like an overall, like damage out is an overall of might and precision. Support stats consist of dominance, restoration, and vit. Obviously there's no overall for those three, because those three are very different things. So, between mind precision and support stats is more important, because this would be equivalent to damage out for support. So up to where we are now, my top three to cover all would be damage out, health, and then support stats. So that kind of is an overall layer that covers everything. So if you're in a small league that can only afford three, and you just want even coverage of everything, those are the three you would get. Okay, out of combat regeneration, this one is very situational. I would place this probably at the very bottom, if not second to last. Out of combat regen, this only comes into effect pretty much for open world when you need to regenerate between objective to objective. So this will play a larger role in the smaller open worlds where the objectives are close together, because you're not going to have as much recovery time. So you want that out of combat regen to kick in as soon as you're done with an objective. The other situation is if you're in an open world where objectives tend to keep you in combat. I actually think it's sort of buggy. It definitely feels buggy, but in some instances, after you complete an objective or combat, you stay in combat for quite some time. You'll notice that in Legion of Doom, Doomed Washington DC, they just keep you in combat for no reason at all. So for this few seconds you're out of combat, this can be useful. But I think a lot of these are edge cases. If you go through most of the open worlds in the game, this will be a non-factor, because you're going to be out of combat for long enough that you would regain all of your power. Critical healing and power healing. This would be the equivalent of the critical attack, but for support roles. So this would be in the middle for me. Again, you want to fill the crits first before. So this would come before healing out, power received, healing received. You're going to want this first, because the crit. First of all, the crits are percent. So percent is always better than point. And just like the critical attack, you can't spec for it. And then again, secondary, power received, healing received after this. So this would be middle, but towards the bottom. And then these last two, I would say, are in the bottom tier, if not the last. Crowd control resistance could be semi-useful, but it feels a little bit placebo sometimes. I mean, if you go back and look at the movement modes, the 5 skill points you put into your movement kind of work towards that. So if we go here, yeah, every movement mode has these here, where they do resistance, crowd control resistance, 5 skill points. It's really, really hard to tell or even test like how well these do, because if you take these off, it almost feels the same, because you have the breakout button, and then in newer episodes, there are things where you need to tap melee. So I don't know. I think they kind of broke the rules of the game as they made new DLCs. So I would consider this one pretty minor. Berserker damage, also minor, because I'm always against things where they give you a bonus when your health is like below a certain amount, because these are situations you're doing your best to avoid anyway, to stay alive. You're not purposely going down to 35% health. So I'm generally against all buffs that do that, and I know there's a bunch of artifacts that do that. So you shouldn't be buffing a thing you're trying to avoid anyway. So this one is okay. This one is probably the bottom one to me. Berserker damage. So yeah, that pretty much rounds out all the stats here. So hopefully this helps you make a decision. Obviously, things are going to be weighted differently depending on what your league is consisted of. Like if you happen to be a specialized league that has more support roles, you might weigh things in that direction. Yep, hope this helps you out. Stay tuned for more videos, and thanks for watching.